Hello Reddit, it's Kate. This chapter of my life could easily be titled The Illusion of Love. You see, when I first met Michael, it was as if the universe had suddenly aligned all its stars just for me. We met at a local charity event. He was representing his small IT firm, and I was there on behalf of the tech giant I work for. Our eyes met across the room, and it felt like everything else faded away. "Hi, I'm Michael," he said, extending his hand with a smile that made my heart flutter. "Kate," I replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you." We talked and laughed, and it felt so natural. Michael was well-spoken, charming, and had a sense of humor that matched mine. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers and even planned for a coffee catch-up later that week. Our dating period was, for the most part, a dream. Michael seemed like everything I had ever wanted. He listened to me, made me laugh, and most importantly, he made me feel loved. When he proposed, it was magical. Candles, roses, the whole shebang. I couldn't say yes fast enough. But here's where the first signs of trouble began to surface. Planning the wedding was stressful, but what wedding isn't, right? My job was demanding, and so was Michael's, but I was the one making most of the arrangements, given my penchant for planning and a better financial standing. "Are you sure about this venue? It's a bit pricey," Michael would say, scrutinizing the brochure for one of the potential venues. "We can afford it," I'd assure him, leaning on the "we" even though my salary was carrying most of the weight. Besides, we deserve a perfect day. Michael would nod, but never seemed quite as enthusiastic as I was. I should have recognized it then, the lukewarm agreement, the hesitant nods. But love has a funny way of painting red flags as mere quirks, doesn't it? Fast forward to the wedding day. My family was there, so were my friends, all laughing and enjoying themselves. The hall looked magical, just like I had imagined it would be. I felt like a princess, waiting for her prince. But when Michael walked into the venue, he looked like he was about to attend a funeral, not a wedding. "Is everything okay?" I asked him, trying to search his eyes for an answer as we stood at the altar. "Yeah, just wedding jitters," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. I wanted to dig deeper, to ask him what was really going on, but then the music started, our cue to start walking down the aisle. And just like that, the moment passed, swallowed by the ceremony, the I doze, and the celebration that followed. Everyone said it was a fantastic wedding, but the man who was supposed to be the most excited about it seemed like he was somewhere far away, lost in a sea of thoughts I couldn't navigate. So that's chapter 1, my friends. If I had paid attention, I would have seen that my fairy tale was setting itself up to be a nightmare, but I didn't, and the worst was yet to come. After the wedding, life seemed to fall into a new but predictable rhythm. We moved into my house, a cozy 2-bedroom property that I had bought before we got married. I had always imagined it as our forever home, a place where we'd make endless memories and perhaps even raise a family. The first few weeks were smooth sailing. We were both busy with work, but we made it a point to have dinner together every night. It was during one of these dinners that I began noticing subtle changes in Michael's behavior. "You seem a little distant lately," I ventured one evening, breaking the silence that had fallen over our dinner table. "Is everything okay at work?" Michael looked up from his plate, as if surprised that I had noticed. "Work's fine. Just a lot going on, you know." I wanted to press further, but chose to let it go for the time being. "Well, if you ever want to talk, you know I'm here," I said, offering a smile. Michael returned the smile, albeit weakly, and we moved on to other topics. But the distance between us kept growing, a widening gap that no amount of conversation seemed to bridge. It was as if we were living parallel lives under the same roof, close yet never intersecting. Then came the day that should have been a joyous occasion for both of us. I found out I was pregnant. My heart was pounding with excitement as I bought a little baby onesie to surprise Michael. I wrapped it up and handed it to him when he got home. "I have something for you," I said, trying to read his face as he unwrapped the small package. When he saw the onesie, his face turned an unreadable shade. "Wow, this is unexpected," he finally said. "We're going to have a baby, Michael. Isn't that amazing?" I could barely contain my enthusiasm. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Are you sure we're ready for this, Kate? A baby is a big responsibility." I was stunned. This wasn't the reaction I had expected or hoped for. "Well, we're married. We love each other. And I always thought we wanted a family," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. Of course. It's a lot to take in, he said, avoiding eye contact once again. I went to bed that night with a sinking feeling in my stomach. What was supposed to be a new chapter in our love story was turning out to be a point of contention. A cloud of uncertainty hung over us, and it was getting heavier with each passing day. The man I had married was slowly becoming a stranger, his aloofness turning into a wall I couldn't scale. Our conversations became increasingly superficial, our interactions strained. It felt like our honeymoon period was not just over. It had been unceremoniously ripped away, leaving behind a harsh reality I was not prepared to face. This, dear Reddit, marks the end of Chapter 2 in my tale. Little did I know, the cracks in our relationship were about to turn into chasms, and my life was headed for a tailspin that I couldn't have imagined even in my wildest nightmares. In the weeks that followed my pregnancy announcement, the atmosphere in our home became increasingly tense. Michael had always been a bit of a night owl, often staying up late, working or playing video games. But his late-night sessions started extending further into the night, and sometimes he wouldn't come to bed until I was getting up for work. Michael, it's 3 a.m. Are you planning to come to bed anytime soon? I remember asking one night after waking up to find the bed beside me still empty. I lost track of time. I have some work to catch up on, he replied, not lifting his eyes from his laptop. This was starting to become a pattern. Michael's late nights turned into late arrivals back home. Sometimes he'd stumble in, visibly drunk, and head straight to bed, ignoring my questions and concerns. It was around this time that I stumbled upon it, the stash. I was cleaning the kitchen, something Michael had promised to help with but never did. As I reached the top shelf of one of the cabinets to put away a cereal box, my hand brushed against something hidden at the back. Pulling it forward, I found a small bag of white powder and a few pills. Drugs. My heart sank to my stomach. When Michael walked in later that evening, I confronted him immediately. Michael, what is this? I held up the bag, my hands trembling. Why are there drugs in our kitchen? He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Why were you snooping around? That's none of your business, Kate. None of my business. We're supposed to be a team, a family. How can you say it's none of my business? You don't get it, he snapped, snatching the bag from my hands and stashing it back where I had found it. You never do. Stop meddling in things you don't understand. I stood there, stunned. This was not the man I had married. This was a stranger, hiding secrets and now yelling at me for finding them. The drugs were just the tip of the iceberg, the first concrete evidence of the chasm that had grown between us. We had reached a point where there was no more pretending, no more brushing things under the rug. The facade had cracked, and what lay behind it? Well, harsh reality that I couldn't ignore any longer. If finding out about the drugs had shocked me, Michael's reaction had terrified me. Gone was the charming man I had fallen in love with, replaced by someone cold, distant, and increasingly volatile. The home that I had envisioned as a sanctuary for our love and future family had turned into a battleground, a place where every interaction was fraught with tension and suspicion. And so ends Chapter 3 of my story, a chapter that brought to light the cracks not just in my marriage, but also in the man I had chosen to share my life with. The worst part, things were about to get even darker. And Reddit! That's where the tale turns from unfortunate to downright harrowing. But I'll save that for the next chapter. As my pregnancy progressed, so did the tension between Michael and me. I had always envisioned this period as one of joy and togetherness, but what it became was a lonely struggle. At a time when I needed support the most, I found myself carrying not just the weight of our unborn child, but also the burden of our failing marriage. What made matters worse was that Michael's detachment had evolved into a sort of callous neglect. I was juggling my demanding job, household chores, and doctor's appointments, all while dealing with the physical and emotional toll of pregnancy. Michael, however, was nowhere to be found, either emotionally or physically. Michael, the house is a mess, and I have a crucial meeting tomorrow. Can you please help me clean up tonight? I asked one evening, my voice tinged with desperation. Can't you see I'm busy, Kate? You act like you're the only one who has responsibilities, he snapped back, not even pausing his video game to look at me. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I was at my breaking point, but I wiped it away and carried on, trying to shield my unborn child from the turmoil that surrounded us. When the baby was born, he had complications that required immediate surgery and a long-term care plan. It was the most terrifying moment of my life, holding my tiny baby for just a few seconds before he was whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit. "Michael, our son needs us right now. He's going to have surgery, and I can't go through this alone," I said through a haze of tears and exhaustion. For the first time in months, Michael looked me in the eyes, but not in the way I had hoped. "Kate, I can't deal with this. It's too much," he said coldly. "Too much, too much. Our son is fighting for his life. How can you be so selfish?" In that moment, something between us irrevocably shattered. Within a week, Michael had packed his bags and told me he couldn't handle the drama anymore. He moved out, leaving me alone to manage not just a newborn with special needs, but also a mountain of medical bills. "Kate, I'm leaving. I can't be a part of this," he declared, a bag slung over his shoulder. "You're abandoning your family when we need you the most," I responded, holding back sobs. "Is this who you truly are, Michael?" "Maybe it is," he said, before walking out the door, leaving me and our newborn son alone in the house I had once thought would be filled with love and laughter. The breaking point had arrived. I couldn't go lower than this, but in that abyss, I found the will to climb back. I filed for divorce and began restructuring my life to care for my son and myself. I also took a deep breath and made a phone call, one that would not only protect my son and me, but would also serve justice where it was due. And that, dear Reddit, is where Chapter 4 concludes, at a point where everything I believed and loved came crashing down. The institution of marriage, the ideal of a family, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, all broken. But in that brokenness, I found the shards with which I would build a new life, a life that didn't involve lies, deceit, or cowardice. And I hadn't forgotten about that little bag I had found in the kitchen cabinet. Oh no, that would play a significant role in the next chapter of this tale. But let's save that for later, shall we? Living with my parents while caring for a newborn with special needs was exhausting, both emotionally and physically. Yet every time I looked into my son's eyes, I found a renewed sense of purpose. I was all he had, and I had to be strong for both of us. My parents were incredibly supportive, helping me navigate the minefield of doctor's appointments and late-night feedings. One evening, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, my thoughts drifting back to the mess Michael had left behind. The memory of that little bag I'd found months ago still haunted me. There it was, an opportunity to turn the tables. My conscience wrestled with the idea. Could I actually do it? Could I actually do it? Could I take that final step to sever the tie that still bound Michael to us, however tenuously? My mother noticed my distant look. "You okay, honey?" "I have a decision to make, Mom. A tough one," I confessed. "If it's the right thing to do, you'll find the strength to do it," she said, as if reading my internal struggle. That settled it. The next day, I called the police and informed them about the drugs I had found in my house while Michael was living there. They acted swiftly, obtaining a search warrant and finding not only the stash I had discovered, but also a larger quantity hidden elsewhere. Within hours, Michael was arrested. "Do you understand why you're being arrested?" The officer asked him as I watched from a distance. "It's Kate, isn't it?" Michael shot me a glare filled with contempt. "You did this." I met his gaze evenly. "You left me no choice." His arrest triggered the beginning of a lengthy legal process. I filed for divorce, citing abandonment and endangerment to our child. Our brief court appearances were filled with tension, but I steeled myself, refusing to be cowed by his intimidation tactics. "I can't believe you'd do this to me, Kate," he hissed during one of the recesses. "You made your choices, Michael. Now you have to live with the consequences," I replied, holding my ground. The day finally came when the gavel came down on both our divorce and Michael's drug case. The judge showed no leniency. Michael was sentenced to 10 years in prison for drug possession. As for the divorce, custody wasn't even a question. I was granted full custody of our son, along with a protective order against Michael. The moment was bittersweet. I had won, but it was a hollow victory. There was no joy in seeing the father of my child being led away in handcuffs, but there was relief. A burden lifted from my shoulders, freeing me to focus on the bright future that my son and I deserved. In that courtroom, I took back control of my life. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future, and for the first time in a long time, that future looked promising. Thus closes Chapter 5, the chapter where I turned the tables and reclaimed not just my life, but also a sense of self. I had come out the other side stronger and more resilient, equipped to face the challenges that lay ahead. But, dear Reddit, the story doesn't end here. There's one more chapter to this tale, one that explores the aftermath of this tumultuous journey and the lessons it taught me. But we'll get to that next time. Life post, divorce and post-trial was a series of adjustments. Living at my parents' house was a godsend, but it was also a reminder that my life had veered off the expected path. It was humbling, but it also gave me a unique vantage point to rebuild my life, brick by brick. I found a new job that was more flexible, allowing me to work from home and take care of my son, who continued to grow stronger every day. With therapy and medical care, he was making progress, and his laughter filled the house with a joy that drowned out the shadows of the past. I often found myself contemplating the turn of events. A part of me felt guilty for having Michael arrested and incarcerated. However, another part of me, a growing part, recognized that justice had been served. "It seems you're doing a lot better these days," my father observed one evening as we sat down to dinner. "I am, Dad. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe," I replied, feeding a spoonful of mashed carrots to my giggling son. "You did what you had to do, Kate. Never apologize for standing up for yourself and your son," he affirmed, a sense of pride lighting up his eyes. And he was right. A couple of years ago, the idea of reporting Michael to the police would have seemed unthinkable. But the person I was back then is not the person I am today. Life has a way of presenting us with circumstances that compel us to make hard choices, choices that change the course of our lives and shape us into the individuals we become. About a year after the trial, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Michael, written on a crumpled piece of prison stationery. "Kate, I've had a lot of time to think. I realize I messed up, but I can't help but feel you ruined my life," it read. I pondered over his words, the ink a tangible manifestation of his bitterness. I felt compelled to respond. "Michael, life is a series of choices, each with its own set of consequences. I didn't ruin your life. Your decisions did," I wrote back, finally closing that chapter for good. So here we are, at the end of Chapter 6, a chapter I've aptly titled Justice Served. I learned that justice is not just about punitive measures. It's about reclaiming one's autonomy, reestablishing moral balance, and most importantly, ensuring a safer, healthier environment for those we love. I took the measures I did not just for myself, but for the well-being of our son. In the years to come, when he asks about his father, I'll choose my words carefully. I'll tell him that people make mistakes, some graver than others, and while those mistakes do define us, they also provide opportunities for redemption. My life is far from the perfect image I once had in mind, but it is real, filled with challenges but also immense love and joy. There's a certain peace in knowing that I stood up for what's right, for myself and for my son. Justice has been served and the scales, once so imbalanced, have been righted. And that, dear Reddit, is the end of this chapter and the close of this tumultuous, enlightening, heartbreaking yet empowering saga. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it serves as a lesson that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way out, always an opportunity to turn the tables and demand